Hi, this is Jerry with Birch Tree Fiber Arts Co. Today I would like to demonstrate how to knit an Afterthought thumb. The Afterthought thumb is used in my new pattern, I Triple Dog Dare You. Basically, an Afterthought thumb is very similar to an Afterthought heel, where you're knitting up to a specific point, you're putting your stitches on waste yarn, you're completing the pattern, and then you're coming back, picking those stitches up, and then knitting it. So for demonstration purposes, I've knit a small sample here. And just like the pattern itself, I've knit up to a specific point. So what I'm going to do is I am actually going to knit a few stitches here in waste yarn. And for that, I'm just going to use this bright green color here just so that we can see the stitches. And of course, in the pattern, and when you are doing this, you're going to want to use a contrasting yarn so that you can actually find those stitches afterwards when you go to pick them up. So I'm at the beginning of my round here, and before I begin, let me just say that I'm actually using a 9-inch circular needle. Now you can use DPNs, you can do the magic loop method if you prefer. However, I do prefer a 9-inch circular, so that's how I'm going to start this one. So again, we're going to use a contrasting yarn. And we're going to start here at the beginning of the round. And I'm just going to knit a few stitches with this contrasting yarn. I think that should work. So we're just going to tighten those up a little bit. And you can already see the contrasting yarn does make a big difference. So now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take these stitches and I'm going to move them back to my left needle. So bear with me here a second. Okay. So we're just going to slip these stitches back. All right, so we're just going to tighten that up a little bit so it doesn't look, and it does get a little finicky. So, you know, practice makes perfect, of course. Okay, so now you'll see that these stitches are back on my needle. So with my main color, what I'm going to do, of course, you're going to mark your round. So you're going to mark the beginning of a round with the stitch marker here. Kind of pull these tight a little bit. As I said, it can get a little finicky. And now we're just going to knit these stitches again using our main color. Of course, just kind of tighten those up a little bit. Now what I'm going to do is I'm basically going to just tuck these little ends inside the mitten so they're out of my way. Some people like to leave them out, but I like them here just because it kind of gets them out of the way so I can work. But whatever method works for you. So here we are. So I've knit those few stitches in the waste yarn, and now what I'm going to do is I am going to complete the round in pattern. And so for this particular and I'm just going to knit it here in this main color, this red. So I'm just going to knit a few stitches here first, just to kind of give you an idea of what it looks like. All right. And right now you can actually see that those waste yarn stitches are quite pronounced. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to complete this round. I'll probably knit a couple rounds first, and I'm going to come back and show you how that looks. Okay. Okay, so you've seen that I've knit a few stitches using my main color. And now you can see that those waste yarn stitches are quite pronounced. And we're just going to kind of tuck those ends in the back. And like I said before, they stay out of your way that way. So now basically what we're going to do is we're going to complete the pattern, in pattern of course, we're going to complete it. So basically we are going to knit the rest of the hand and then bind off, and then we're going to come back And what we're going to do is we're going to pick up the stitches below the waist yarn and above the waist yarn, and then we're going to knit the thumb. But before we move on to that, I wanted to point out that this, of course, is the right hand mitten. So in the pattern, I do note I do provide you with instructions on how to complete the left hand mitten. And basically, you're going to knit across a certain amount of stitches, knit those stitches on waist yarn, and then you're going to follow the exact same instructions that we did with the right hand mitten. You're going to just complete it, come back, and we're going to pick up those stitches. Okay, so I'm going to finish this mitten, and then I'm going to come back and I'm going to show you how to pick up those stitches and start the thumb. All right. Okay, so I've completed the hand of the mitten out to the bind off, and now all we are left with is our thumb. So if we take a look at our mitten here, we'll remember that we knit the mitten from the cuff up. We knit in a few waist yarn stitches. We completed that round in our main color, and then we finished the mitten in pattern. So now what we need to do to finish this mitten is we need to pick up the stitches that fall below our waist yarn stitches and the stitches that are above our waist yarn stitches. So if we count the V's of our green yarn here, we will see that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 stitches. So that means we need to pick up the 8 stitches below and above. So with our needle, and you'll see that I'm using a elongated corded needle because I'm going to do this in the magic loop, we're going to want to start from this edge here so that we're knitting in the round in the same direction we did when we knit it. So if we look below, we're going to see that our first stitch is the right hand side of this stitch is going to be right here. So there's our first, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 5, and 6, 7, and 8. So there's our 8 stitches below our waist yarn. So we're just going to slide that needle through, and we're going to give our mitten a turn. And now we are going to pick up the 8 stitches that are directly above our waist yarn stitches. And even though the mitten has been turned this way, this is still going to be the stitches above, because remember, this is our starting point here. So counting the V's, of course, our first inclination would be to pick up this stitch here because it falls directly above this one here. But actually, if we follow this stitch here, which is one of the stitches we just picked up, our first stitch to pick up is actually below this V, which is right here. So there's 1, and 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and there's a tricky one. Let's just do that again, and 8. So now we have our 8 stitches above. So we're just going to pull those through, and I'm just going to turn this mitten back around again so you can see what we have here. And sorry about all the noise on those cords. So now you'll see that we picked up the 8 stitches above and below this waist yarn. So our next step is going to be to remove these waist yarn stitches so that we can begin knitting in the round. Okay, so looking at our waist yarn stitches, all we need to do now is to just kind of pluck these stitches out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just reach my hand inside here, and starting from this side, I am going to pull out that first stitch. There we go. And you're just going to gradually and gingerly, not ruining the stitches on your needles, just pull out these waist yarn stitches. Take a deep breath. Everything's going to be okay. That last guy right there. So now you can see that we have stitches live on our needle now. So now we can begin to work in the round in pattern per the instructions that you have. But to begin that, this will be our beginning of our round. But what I want to mention is you're going to want to pick up 2 stitches in these gaps. So even though there's 8 stitches here, 8 stitches here, you're going to want to fill in, otherwise you're going to have holes when you knit this around. So what you're going to want to do is when you begin your round here, you're going to want to pick up 2 stitches on this side and 2 stitches on this side. So you're going to be going from 16 stitches to 20 stitches, and that's exactly what you want. So I'm not going to demonstrate how to knit this, but I will say that when you pick it up, you're just going to want to put your needle in and find 2 stitches that will close up those gaps on both sides. And I'm going to do a couple rounds of that off camera. I'm going to come back and I'm going to show you what that looks like, and we'll go from there. Okay. Okay, so I've knit a few rounds of my thumb and picking up the stitches on both sides to close up those gaps. I think that looks pretty good. So what you'll do to complete this mitten is you'll follow the instructions for the thumb in pattern, bound off, and then of course weave in your ends and block and etc. But one thing that's obvious is you're going to need to knit 2 mittens. So let me just show you what a completed mitten looks like. So this is the right hand of our triple dog dare you mitten, and I've finished the thumb, bound off, but I want to show you what the left hand mitten looks like. So on the left hand mitten, you can see that the placement of the thumb is quite different, of course. So for the instructions are very similar to the right hand mitten, where you are going to be adding waist yarn. But instead of adding the waist yarn at the beginning of our round, you're going to be adding the waist yarn towards the end of the beginning of the front of the side of the mitten. So the pattern is very clear about how many stitches to knit across in your main color, and then following the same instructions that you did for the right hand mitten, where it's returning those waist yarn stitches back to the left hand needle and knitting it in your main color and finishing the round. Everything is exactly the same. You're still going to be picking up stitches above and below the waist yarn stitches, picking up 2 stitches on both sides to close up those gaps, and then finishing your mitten. Well, good luck. I hope you found this tutorial helpful, and I hope you check me out on Birch Tree Fiber Arts Co. And happy knitting. Thank you.